Hello, we're Glowing Thumb Studio, and we brought you Mind Protocol. Our team is comprised of Shawn Honeycutt, Sagan Harris, David Hale, Daniel Van Meter, and Henry Leung. The game's initial concept is explained by David Hale. The game's control scheme is explained by Sagan Harris. The storyline is explained by Daniel Van Meter, and the game's environmental feel is explained by Henry Leung.
The initial vision was to create a game that combined the side-scrolling shooting action of Metal Slug with the teleportation of X-Men's Nightcrawler. As our game progressed, the action focus shifted from wildly shooting to precisely shooting enemies.
Played using the mouse and keyboard, with the mouse being the aiming/teleporting reticule, and the keyboard controlling the player's movement, really just a classic gaming side-scrolling setup.
This tested soldier by the name of Resnick, he's been experimented on to do a mind prototype to where he can teleport from spot to spot, and that's been the main camp we wanted to provide the player. As he starts out in the lab, he learns how to use these abilities while at the same time escaping from the people that's trying to cap the secret. As you go throughout the levels, you'll have to deal with different types of enemies, different types of traps during the side scrolling, and find out who's behind it and why they want you stopped.
We populated the game with a bunch of nasty environmental hazards, turning it into a kind of survival action game, which is what I personally intended from the get-go.
What I think went rather well with the process was the documentation process, the progressive work with detail in the game, and the entire collaboration with the team. Sagan, of course, speaks about team collaboration a little bit later on. Dave talks about the same thing, and external resources as well. Daniel speaks of discussions and progression through Skype sessions and level pacing, and perception by the player. Henry speaks of check-in times, meetings, and cleanup times with playtesting.
I think team collaboration was the most successful thing about Mind Protocol's development. The mechanics of the game came from us literally taking the teleport mechanic from Game 1 and the fast puzzle survival element stuff from Game 2 and just kind of mashing them together, then sitting down and rendering the whole thing repeatedly until we were happy. But the even better part of that was that we would always keep each other in check. So we'd spend an hour talking about just one thing. One of us could just raise their hand and say, okay, need to move on and just decide what we want right now and then just leave it alone. Everybody had input, and that was awesome because when it's just one person's story, even if that story is really good, it's probably not as good as it could be because you're only getting sort of one set of eyes on a bigger picture.
Teams started off strong in terms of getting to know each other. There were bumpy times, but overall, the team really came together to get as many things done as we could. External people were called on to help us with sound, art, coding, etc. They did give us help in areas we were stuck in, particularly coding. The team's text documentation was very strong. If there was any cloudy moments of any sort, we could always look back in our documents to get a clear head. The team stuck with the evolved and emergent gameplay as the mechanics grew. Our team's creation and implementation of environmental hazards. We have fire pits, acid pits, crushers, electric floors, and barriers. This really helped augment the gameplay since our enemies' development didn't come through.
We had a bunch of different ideas when it came to build our game. Some of them worked great, some of them not so much. The ideas that worked really well, we kept through the process, such as check-in times every day, meetings every week, and days where we just spent cleaning up our Kismet and the script. A lot of development time went to testing different types of control schemes and changing our scripts to go with the new schemes. The other major portion of development went into the hazards, which turned out really well.
One technique that worked extremely well was the process of using our discussion sessions and to brainstorm different ideas, coming from first to paper, then digitally throughout different Skype sessions, then putting them in, whether it was static meshes, particle effects, how we wanted the level flow to go, the traps, how we wanted the world to be perceived by the player and the instructors. That's what I believe we did extremely well during these months of the final project.
Some things did go wrong with the development of the game. I think we spent too much time on mechanics and the camera, not enough time on immersive qualities or level design. Dave speaks of being rushed, level design issues, and problems with external resources. Daniel speaks of scope throughout the process. Henry speaks of problems with some of the environmental hazards. Sagan speaks a lot of the iterative issues we had, spending so much time on things like camera and mechanics.
Our team felt rushed since we crammed the entire month of RAM into the first week of Final Project 1, alongside the required work of Final Project. While we had a bit of a lead in some areas, we were behind in others. Level design was not organized. Only 2 mock-ups were made. Level iteration progressed sluggishly. No reference images were collected to give visual cues to what the level should look like or what emotions they should inspire. No visual themes were developed beyond words until the levels were actually created. It was difficult to place reliance on the external people that helped us. Their project and grade was not on the line. Sometimes they didn't deliver or respond to our queries. Nearly all our meshes are inherent to UDK. Our custom character was not able to be implemented due to some tech issues with UDK. Our enemies were never fully realized. On paper, we created several enemies with various attack styles, but once our team attempted coding AI, we ended up with only 2 enemies. But this did improve our creation of environmental hazards.
What I believe didn't go well was underestimating the scope of the entire process in whole. At first we started out by trying to do 10 levels, and then about a month in we just realized with the help of instructors' advice that was just too broad of an idea to get out in 3 months. I would have loved to have been able to do 10 levels, but I believe that the process of going down to 4 definitely helped us focus in our scope of the game, provide the player with a better, more balanced flow to each level compared to 10 levels idea-wise and flow-wise.
Some ideas that did not work well during the production were some of the hazards. For instance, I tried making some kind of proximity or tripwire plasma bomb and an anti-teleportation field, neither of which worked. During the process, we also tried to make some skeletal meshes for the players and enemies, which did not seem to work out.
I think the thing that didn't work out is that we spent a lot of time, once we'd gotten those basic ideas down, doing and redoing a very small number of them. The teleport distance / recharge time, and the camera behavior in particular. It kind of felt like we had our hands tied when we kept having to redo these things because we couldn't really move forward with anything else until those things were absolutely dead on. We all realized that we couldn't move forward until those things were absolutely dead on because it's kind of the bedrock, the foundation of the game. But some weeks it felt like we were just saying, well, what would it be like if we changed it to this? Oh, that doesn't work at all. I wish we hadn't spent all this time changing it when we could have been doing something else.
I think the one thing that we've all learned a lot more of has been Kismet, and even though 1/3 of my time was spent in script trying to get our mechanics and enemies to fully function, I believe everything we've learned here, especially through Kismet, will be useful through the game industry.
As far as learning skills go, Kismet, full stop. I thought I was really good with Kismet going into this, but holy crap, even in the first week I realized I had so much more to learn. Even simple stuff like making a functioning crusher, I could get it to move, but I had no idea how to make it turn players into a meaty pulp when it collided with them. I was just daunted so much by tasks like that. But we had some serious Kismet experts in the group, and I feel so much more confident in my abilities now. This was so awesome because not only did I learn from the teachers, but I learned from my fellow students so much as well.
Communication is crucial to a team, especially a virtual team where our main source of communication is text, augmented by video and audio chats. It's important to keep the team moving forward and keep everyone aware of what's completed, currently being worked on, and what is just started.
My main skill was level design and particle effects and that type of area. I always loved how to aesthetically put everything together into level design. As the project went on, I continued to learn about Kismet and all of its functions, how each function worked especially well with script without having to actually use script. That's what I believe is the one skill I definitely learned most throughout this entire process. And it's helped me to be a more balanced designer. I believe having the tools of Kismet knowledge has been a definite positive for my learnability throughout this project.
I have learned so much in my time here, especially in the final project months, where I was forced to do extensive research on the development engine we were using. I learned how to use Kismet in a more proficient manner and also learned various tricks and ways to manipulate Kismet to my advantage.
The initial vision of Mind Protocol had storyline, cinematics, and a player character that wasn't part of the UDK kit. We had issues of scope explained later on by Daniel that narrowed down our field of growth within the game.
Mind Protocol sprang out of the merging of our two groups and our two game ideas into one concept. I think I may have come up with the initial idea, but we all sat down and refined it until we created this teleporting government agent gone rogue story. It's not necessarily the most original thing in the world, it's like Bourne Identity meets Nightcrawler, but it serves as a logical, relatively believable vehicle for the gameplay. Mind Protocol was intended to be a fast-paced side-scrolling shooter like Metal Slug or Cave Story, with a heavy emphasis on using the player's own mobility to overcome large numbers of enemies and difficult puzzles. You know, when we drop the player into a room with 10 enemies and 2 rocket turrets, we don't want their first reaction to be, oh crap, we want their first reaction to be, alright, here we go.
My initial vision of the game is baby talk compared to what it is today. We put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this game in order to make it what it is today. P.S. The blood is entirely figurative, but the tears and sweat is true.
Our initial vision was a lot broader with how the game compares to currently compared to the start of Final projects. At first we wanted 10 levels to where you would go throughout different environments, forest, even a monk monastery. But as the scope of the game for the first month, we started falling behind with focusing too much on having to design levels, struggling with the mechanics. Good advice by our instructor, we scoped it down to 4 levels, to where it's just initially where you're in the city and you're trying to run away from a person. It compares very well to how we would have started out. It's just mainly that the initial vision was a lot more levels and a broader environment and aesthetic feel. Aside from that, we've been able to stay on point to almost perfection.
I think this iteration of the game is a great deal slower paced than the team had originally intended. I think difficulties with the AI programming kept us from having the sort of deluge of cannon fodder firing at the player that we wanted to, but I think the highly mobile gameplay is still intact, which is really the core of the game, not necessarily the throwing the enemies, but how the player interacts with the environment that's always trying to kill them.
I feel like our game is a solid B in grade. Mechanics for the player are strong, running left and right, jumping and double jumping, with the teleport mechanic that has good player feedback when you can and can't teleport. Environmental encounters have some variation. One type crushes the player, and 4 require complete avoidance, with one being able to be shut off by shooting at it. The levels, however, feel a little disjointed, and the player just kind of progresses through, with no real feel of accomplishment.
In my personal opinion, the game plays perfectly well, aside from a few minor glitches here and there. We have come to a point in which the game runs well for everyone, and it is loads of fun.
In this cool features section, Sagan delights on Underbelly, Daniel highly regards the teleportation, and Henry points out an environmental hazard he truly loves. I want to point out the lights, switching colors, and explosions when the control boxes are destroyed, and the cool electric effect on the electric floors, and the way the player teleports around from one place to another using the mouse as its directional pointer.
Underbelly is my baby, and I'm a big old school shooter fan, so I tried to make it both as hard and as fair as I could. I wouldn't ask players to beat something that I couldn't personally beat either. I feel like that's a pretty low move, but there is a shortcut in there that you have to look for. There was one section right at the end that's real mean, just like hop off the screen and slap you in the face nasty, and I felt a little bad about it after I designed it, so I put in an alternate route for people who are just, oh, screw this, I hate timing jumps in midair. The kicker is that if you do things the hard way, you'll pass by the easy way, and then it'll be like, oh, I could have done just that. That's awesome.
The main cool feature I want to just emphasize to everybody is the teleport mechanic. This just makes the game flow so much better compared to just a normal 2D side scroller. It allows so much strategy to be involved in avoiding enemies, or getting through traps, or skipping areas if you know how to use the teleportation just right. I just want to emphasize that that is the #1 cool feature that I want everybody to try.
One feature I would like to point out is the chalk floor. That thing took us a ton of work and frustration to get to work.
A very special thanks to those who helped us make this game, and we hope you enjoy playing it as much as we enjoyed making. Any questions?